Audio, 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 audio. Going to wait to see if someone comes over from our last stream. Can you hear me now? Testing, testing, 1, 2. Well, I see the green dots, so I'm going to presume that the answer is yes. And I'm going to jump back into it. What we have now is a much more thorough and realistic response to the end of the OAuth flow, where we handle these 3 different scenarios. This, though, the second scenario isn't quite working because our authentication system isn't sufficiently fleshed out. So let's do that next and build out the rest of the authentication system such that when a user does authenticate, we have everything else in place to manage that. So there are a couple of things we have commented out along the way. Current session here, current user here. So we're going to need a current model. Let's see if that's interesting. So what I nope, not that. What I typically do is this. So when you set current session with a session object, let's call this instance actually, then we go ahead and set current user implicitly as well. So if we now set current session here in our sign-in method, our current user will be set also. And we now have a current user. So we can uncomment this. As just a sort of basic example, I'm going to throw a little header up here. And I'm going to put the current user's email. So if we come back, things are broken. Our current user isn't set. What is the problem here? So the second half of what we need is to ensure that our current session is set for every request where we have a signed cookie for the session, right? So how exactly do we do that? There are a number of different possible ways. One thing we could do is we could put a before action here, and we could check returned unless we have a cookie, and then we set current session to the session instance that we find from the cookie. I actually did expect that one to work. So let's do some quick debugging here. We get in. Do we have we do. So do we have a current session? We do, but do we have a current user? We do not. So our code here in current is a bit off. How have I done this before? Let's do a quick Google. Rails set current user when current session is set. Nah, that's not working. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment so I can go and look at an example from a application at work, just to see what it is that I am misremembering here. Okay. Slight difference. So I'm not sure if it's important that super is before or after. Probably not. I think it is the self dot that is essential. So we come back and we are showing that. Okay. Self dot, that's the essential bit. So we could do this. The other thing I have done before, which we might get into later, is set up a route constraint so I can explicitly designate which of my routes require an authenticated user. And as a part of that route constraint, I do basically what is here as well. So I'm checking, is the cookie there? And if it is, I set current session, and I set that in the route constraint. So earlier in the request lifecycle, and then in the authenticate method, I have return if current session. So another possibility, but this works. And we can actually make this throw. Like so. And we could, I don't want to say the robot's name, but she misheard something. We can also make this I don't know why it gets this formatting so wrong. Set it up like this, where, so just to force it to go this route. We can do this. We redirect it too many times, right? So the thing we need to do is we need to skip this before action for public routes. And there we go. And now it's gone. One thing that I have tried once, we can do this, set all that up. We could also set up different abstract controllers that very similar to our layouts, right? So we could have a public controller and an authenticated controller, and have our different concrete controllers inherit from the appropriate parent. And we only set up this authenticate before action in the authenticated controller instead of in the application controller, where it's true everywhere. Just depends on how you like to organize your code. We need to make this true for users controller as well. And we need to make it true for both create and show here. All three of these controllers are public, right? We need to allow unauthenticated users to begin the authentication process. So we hide them. But this covers the essentials for authentication. I should have committed in between. That is my bad. So let's add git add db test, but we need to fix this. These test 1, 2, access token 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, access token 0, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, whatever, auth. Neither of them expire, just to make this pass our database constraints. Come back. Git add db test app model equals user I think we'll just add this all. You can say, let me hide this little thing, that we are flashing out the authentication system, the application. Just make sure we don't have any problems. Look at that, we do. Let's fix them. Everything's clean now. Push all that up. So this is nice progress, right? We have a pretty minimalist, but still realistic OAuth flow going on here. One thing we can definitely do is bring this over just to set up both of those. So sessions new, users new, signing in, signing up, they both go through our OAuth flow. The beginning of that, signing in and signing up, is identical in the way we've set it up now. When we come back, we find or create a connected account and or a user. And make sure that the user, forgot one. And we make sure that the user you know what? We also need to make sure that our connected account is updated with the new information we just got back. And this is signing up. And this needs to also redirect. And I'm going to say this one, connected provider account. Missed a few details there. But with these final details added, we have like everything we need. All right, this works. This authenticates users through a third-party OAuth provider and handles the essential details. Right? This is pretty nice. Our authentication system is very understandable, but not like wildly insecure. And it's small enough that it's easy to like do a security audit, right? We don't have to look at a ton of code. Our database, right? 3 tables. This is not massive, complicated stuff, right? The authorizations controller itself, not even 100 lines long. And yeah, I mean, I'm intentionally making it quite procedural right now here. Do not like try to dry things up before you really have a clear idea of what precisely you're doing. And in general, procedural code is just much easier to come back to later and grok quickly. So don't look down on procedural code. But it's not massive. It is quite understandable. You can throw a few comments to make sure it is as understandable as possible. Now, of course, I haven't done anything on the view layer or anything. Like, none of this is pretty. It's not about making a pretty app right now, but it is functioning. Not doing a ton here, but we have a sense of like what the provider is doing. So here we are, you know, this has basically been 4 hours of work, and we could be done, right? If you are integrating with a single OAuth provider, now you know this is what it takes. Not very intimidating. And you can copy and paste this code. I'll you know, it's all up on GitHub. Where do we go from here, though? Right? There are a few different things that we could consider. So, one, we could handle a wider variety of error states. Let me just give one example. I think Facebook talked about it. Yeah, so for example, if people using your app don't accept the login dialog and click cancel, they will be redirected to the following: your redirect URI with an error reason, error, and an error description. We have nothing in place to handle this kind of error. Our provider is also not showing actual permissions. We don't have a permission screen. We could add that so that when you have that permission screen, now you have another fork, right? So you give users a yes or a no. If they press yes, they're going to continue down the flow that we have. If they press no, what happens and how do we respond? The other thing, we need to ensure that we handle these two requests having issues, the requests timing out, just the network being flaky and they fail. We don't handle those error paths. We don't handle the error paths where these database writes, which we have throwing errors, if they error, we're not capturing that. Other Possible errors. I'm sure that there's at least a couple others that I am not thinking of right now, but you get the idea, right? Like we could drive towards resiliency and really think through like what are all of the potential error points in this flow? How do we want to handle them? How do we report to the user? How do we report them to our error monitoring service? How do we reset the flow? What does that look like? So there's that direction. The other direction is to add to the complexity of our implementation. So for example, we could, which one was it? Yeah, so Facebook, for example, their access tokens have an expiration. So we could have our provider add an expiration and properly track that. You know, you'll see here, this is an expires in seconds till expiration. We have an expires at date time. So how do we convert their data into the format that our data needs and expects? We could add other providers, right? So we could set up other integrations. You can connect with provider A or provider B. They have some differences, and we account for those differences. As we have two or maybe three, we might start to give a sense of the different ways in which we could dry the code up, right, and extract a general module to drive OAuth integrations without hiding everything in rack middleware like OmniAuth does. We could make the whole sort of structure a little bit more OmniAuth-like. What we put in auth, you know, in OmniAuth, you're going to get a union of access credentials and user info in the auth hash you get back from OmniAuth. We could also, like if we're making things more complicated, we could have slightly different flows. The logic could be different depending on whether or not we are coming from sessions new, right? So we're signing in, or users new, where we're signing up, right? So for example, imagine the way we have this set up right now. If I go to the sign in page, right, and I don't have an account, it doesn't matter. We will sign you up. You can sign up through the sign in page. Reasonable default, I think, for many apps that are integrating OAuth. But maybe for your system, what you want is you want to make those initial decisions lead to actual differences in implementation. So if you come to the sign in page, if we can't sign you in, then we error and reset you, and we send you back to the sign up page, right? We say, we don't know who you are, right? Like you went to the OAuth provider, you came back, we have a record of you in the OAuth provider, but that record doesn't match any records that we have. So you need to sign up. You can't sign in. As one example, right? So that we could evolve the way that our actual authentication flow works. We could also, right, we don't currently have enough routes, right? So we could add some basic CRUD resource to add more routes to handle the situation where I'm signed out and I navigate directly to an authenticated route, right? A protected route. The protected route redirects me to the new session path, right? And I sign in, and then we want to ensure that at the end of that sign-in flow, instead of redirecting you back to the root path, let's redirect you back to the path that you wanted to go to originally, right? This is a very common feature that we want in our authentication systems. I was trying to go to my resources index page. I wasn't signed in. You sent me off to sign in. I did all of that. Now take me back to resources index. Don't take me to some random other place. How would we build that feature and make that work? So these are the sort of enhancements and complications that we can explore in the coming days. But I wanted to make a clear point of stopping right now to say that this is sufficient. What we have after 4 hours of work is a sufficient, ready to run authentication system driven through OAuth. And we have everything we need to talk to the provider API on behalf of the user, right? We have their access token. It's associated to the user through the connected account. So if we had in our job, I'm just in application job, but right, we have some perform, we get a user, right? We can come in and find the connected account for this user, for the provider we want to talk to. We can get the access token. We can use our, we don't have this created yet, right? But our provider client. We initialize that with our token. So now we have an HTTP client that we can use that will have the proper authentication headers. And then we could do client get get some resources for them. We can do all of that in a job. This is what the code would look like roughly. Right, everything we need to talk to the API on behalf of the user is available to us and present. We are handling the authentication. Once you sign in, you stay signed in. We have these session records, so we could build that session index, allow you to manage everything. It really is sufficient. And I hope that after these 4 hours and with this code base up on GitHub, as a reminder, it's just fractal bind OAuth demo. And I'm pushing everything up. You'll see I'm not signed in Chrome. I don't use Chrome regularly. So it's totally public. You can go and copy and paste any of the code. This really is all that there is to it. But I want to make sure that we all feel comfortable, with a fuller range of complexity. And so on Thursday and Friday, I will dig into those two directions of complexity, or we'll make it more resilient to errors. And we will explore a wider range of possible OAuth interactions, right? Getting different kinds of payloads back, different kinds of data, differences in the back and forth of the flow show like the flexibility that is available to us. And in general, what we're going to see coming out of it, right, is that by owning all of the code ourselves, addressing these different needs is straightforward, right? Because it's just refactoring code. It's not wrestling with a black box rack middleware system that exposes the specific public API that it exposes, and you need to hope that it all works. And if anything goes wrong, you're kind of in the dark, right? So that's the plan for the next 2 days. Hopefully, everyone feels sufficiently comfortable with the amount of complexity that we have taken on thus far, and also feel similarly like, okay, this is manageable. This is not too scary. And sorry that the stream died in the middle, but such is life. I am trying to keep these streams a little bit shorter, more digestible, also to demonstrate like this is not mountainous amounts of work. This is pretty straightforward, not too complicated. We can do a lot in what will end up being, I don't know, 6 hours of work total. So thanks for hanging out. I will tweet again when I go live tomorrow, but I plan to just, I should be able to just keep doing 6 to 7 my time, CET, UTC, +2, I think. So come and hang out tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll focus on resiliency. And then on Friday, we will explore variations in different OAuth flows. So that's it for now. And I will see everybody tomorrow. Bye.